The camera zooms in as the debate begins. Zohran Mamdani takes the stage confidently, while Ben Shapiro paces with an air of smug self-assurance. Zohran Mamdani. We are living in a world where the fight for LGBTQ plus rights and gender equality is more urgent than ever. And yet we still have people like Ben Shapiro, who use outdated ideologies to try to hold us back. It's not just about legal rights, it's about human dignity. It's about the right to exist authentically in a world that has long tried to fit us into a mold. And I won't stand by while people like Ben attempt to turn back the clock on the progress we've made. Ben Shapiro. Zohran, you're talking about dignity, but what I'm seeing is an attempt to tear apart the very fabric of society. Gender is binary. We don't need to invent new categories to make people feel better about themselves. People can live their lives however they want, but when it comes to policy, we need clear definitions. There's no such thing as gender fluidity. It's not biological. The fact is, Ben Shapiro interrupts, but Zohran stays calm, clearly prepared. Zohran Mamdani, you're entitled to your opinion, Ben, but it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of both science and the lived experience of millions of people. Gender is not something that can be reduced to a narrow, rigid definition. It's a spectrum. And science has been clear for decades that the binary understanding of gender doesn't reflect the complexity of human identity. The tension rises as both figures stand their ground, the audience on the edge of their seats. Zohran Mamdani. Ben, let's get real for a moment. We're talking about people who are being denied healthcare, respect, and recognition because of outdated and harmful views. What about the trans community? What about the millions of people who have fought and died for the right to live freely in their own skin? Your stance doesn't just fail to acknowledge the truth, it actively harms real people. A brief pause as the gravity of Zohran's words sinks in. The tension between the two is palpable, and the debate has just begun. Ben Shapiro, oh please. This isn't about hurting people, it's about reality. You can't just create new realities because they sound good to you. You want to talk about harm? Let's talk about the fact that pushing these radical ideas onto children in schools does more harm than good. We should be teaching kids actual science, not encouraging them to question their biological sex. That's how you create confusion, not clarity. Zohran's voice sharpens with determination, ready to take this challenge head on. Zohran Mamdani. That's exactly the problem, Ben. You're not listening. You're so caught up in your need to be right that you're failing to understand the human lives at stake. It's not about radicalism, it's about humanity. This is a moment where we can either move forward together or we can continue to ignore the lived realities of marginalized communities. The time to act is now. The debate hits a high point, with the first major clash between Zohran and Ben setting the stage for what promises to be an unforgettable argument. The crowd is torn, and it's clear that this debate is about to spiral into something even more explosive. The camera zooms in on Zohran Mamdani, his eyes fixed on Ben Shapiro. He's clearly agitated, but his voice remains steady. The audience is hanging on every word. Zohran Mamdani, Ben, you keep pushing this narrative about science and reality, but the science isn't on your side. We've known for years now that gender is more than just biology. It's about identity, expression, and yes, social constructs that influence who we are and how we live. To reduce people's entire existence to a biological fact is to completely ignore the complexity of the human experience. And that is what you're doing here. Ben Shapiro, with his usual sharp and dismissive tone, jumps in. Ben Shapiro, Zohran, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm not denying anyone's feelings. What I'm denying is the idea that we should change societal norms based on subjective feelings. We need to recognize that facts matter. And the fact is there are two sexes, male and female. No amount of political correctness is going to change that. You can't force society to pretend otherwise. Zohran looks directly into the camera, his voice gaining strength. Zohran Mamdani. That's where you're wrong, Ben. You want to make this about facts and truth, but the truth is that for centuries, our understanding of gender has been limited and biased. And you're trying to keep it that way because it fits your narrow worldview. But the reality, Ben, is that people are changing. Society is evolving. And the fact that you're resistant to that change is telling. It's not about political correctness, it's about human rights. The crowd murmurs in agreement. Zohran's words resonate with the audience. But Ben is not backing down. He smirks, trying to maintain control of the narrative. Ben Shapiro, human rights? Please, I don't think anyone's rights are being violated here. You want to talk about rights? Let's talk about the rights of people who are being told to accept something they fundamentally disagree with. What about the rights of parents who don't want their children exposed to this ideology? What about the rights of women who are being told their spaces are no longer safe because of people who identify as trans? You want to talk about rights, but you're completely ignoring the rights of people who don't agree with you. Zohran's expression hardens, but he stays calm, ready to dismantle this argument. Zohran Mamdani, you're talking about a tiny minority of people who feel uncomfortable, Ben. And guess what? In a world where the majority holds the power, it's their voices that are already heard. The discomfort you're referring to is based on fear, misunderstanding, and a lack of empathy. It's not a justification for denying basic rights to millions of people. People don't get to pick and choose whose rights matter based on personal discomfort. That's not how equality works. Ben leans forward, clearly agitated. He raises his voice, but Zohran remains unfazed. Ben Shapiro, look, I'm all for equality. But equality doesn't mean that we have to change everything to accommodate a few people who are choosing to live in a way that most people don't understand. It's one thing to advocate for rights. It's another thing to force your beliefs onto others. Zohran Mamdani. And here's where you completely miss the point, Ben. This isn't about forcing anyone to believe anything. This is about giving people the freedom to live as they are, without fear of discrimination, violence, or being pushed to the margins of society. No one is asking you to change your beliefs, Ben. We're asking for the basic right to be seen, heard, and respected. A long pause. The crowd watches, captivated by the tension between the two. The stakes are high and the debate is far from over. Zohran Mamdani, do you know how many transgender individuals in this country are murdered every year simply for existing? Do you know how many people are afraid to go to the doctor, to go to school, to walk down the street, because they fear they will be attacked or ostracized? This isn't just a political debate. This is a matter of survival. Ben, trying to regain control, interrupts again, but Zohran is relentless. Ben Shapiro, I get it, Zohran. But that doesn't mean we just throw everything out and redefine society in a way that makes everyone uncomfortable. You're asking for the world to change for you. Zohran's voice gets firmer as he closes the gap. Zohran Mamdani, I'm not asking for the world to change, Ben. I'm asking for people to recognize that the world already has changed, and those of us fighting for equal rights are simply trying to make sure no one gets left behind. Because at the end of the day, it's about people. It's about dignity, and no matter how hard you try to fight against it, that truth is coming, whether you like it or not. The tension in the room grows as the debate continues to intensify. The audience holds their breath as Zohran Mamdani's words hang in the air. There's a brief silence before Ben Shapiro, seething with frustration, responds sharply. Ben Shapiro, you're so hell-bent on pushing your narrative that you're completely ignoring the facts on the ground. Zohran, you talk about dignity and respect, but where's the respect for the overwhelming majority of people who believe in traditional values? Are their rights any less important than the ones you're fighting for? Because frankly, that's what this comes down to. Zohran doesn't flinch. He steps forward, his voice filled with a mix of passion and frustration. Zohran Mamdani. Ben, this isn't about traditional values versus progress. This is about human rights. Let me remind you of something important. Historically, traditional values have been used to justify slavery, segregation, and countless other human rights violations. Just because something is traditional doesn't make it right. The idea that the majority can dictate who deserves rights is exactly what's wrong with your argument. The audience reacts to Zohran's bold statement. He's clearly in control, and the crowd is shifting their allegiance. But Ben isn't backing down. His face is flushed with anger as he fires back. Ben Shapiro, are you really comparing the fight for LGBTQ plus rights to slavery? That's a cheap, dishonest analogy. The fact is, what you're advocating for is not just about respect. It's about force. You're trying to push policies that disrupt social structures, force schools to teach kids about gender fluidity, and erase the very concept of male and female. The room begins to murmur with growing tension. Zohran takes a deep breath, his response measured but laced with conviction. Zohran Mamdani, let's get one thing straight, Ben. It's not about erasing gender. It's about recognizing the reality of gender as an expression that is far more complex than what you've been taught. No one is forcing anyone to change their beliefs. What we're asking for is the freedom to live authentically without being judged or discriminated against. And guess what? That freedom is exactly what this country was founded on. Zoran's words are sharp and direct, challenging Ben's deeply held views, but this time Ben is visibly rattled. He tries to compose himself, but can't quite match Zoran's calm resolve. Ben Shapiro, you talk about freedom, but what about the rights of children? What about their rights to grow up in a world where they're not indoctrinated into an ideology that's still so controversial? Why are we pushing this agenda in schools, Zoran? You're talking about freedoms, but what about the freedom of parents to protect their kids from this? The crowd falls silent as the debate hits a boiling point. This is where the tension takes a dramatic turn. Zohran, seizing the moment, speaks with piercing clarity. Zohran Mamdani, Ben, you've been using the same tired talking points to distract from the real issue. The real issue is that children are already being harmed by society's refusal to accept them as they are. Do you know how many young people have been driven to suicide because they felt they had no place in this world? How many kids are struggling with their identity and facing ridicule and violence because people like you refuse to even acknowledge their existence? The room goes still. Zoran's words hit like a hammer, and Ben, trying to regain control, is visibly flustered. Ben Shapiro, Zohran, that's a tragic situation, but you can't just blame people who disagree with you. There's more to this than your emotional argument. There's the question of how we define reality, how we protect our kids from confusion, and whether we should be teaching them to question the very basics of biology. But Zohran, ever resolute, leans in and delivers the knockout blow. Zohran Mamdani, no, Ben. The real tragedy is that people like you are refusing to accept the reality that these children are struggling because of people who refuse to acknowledge the complexity of human identity. You are ignoring their pain and pretending that your truth is the only one that matters. And that is what perpetuates the harm. The reality is, people's lives are at stake, and we can no longer afford to ignore it. The audience breaks into applause, and for a moment the tension in the room feels almost electric. Zohran Mamdani's words have turned the tide. Ben Shapiro, though still standing, is now visibly rattled. He knows that the narrative has shifted, and the crowd is no longer on his side. But Zohran's calm demeanor continues as he concludes the third part of this heated exchange. Zohran Mamdani, at the end of the day, Ben, this isn't about political ideology. It's about humanity. It's about ensuring that people are free to live their lives without fear, without hate, and with the respect they deserve. The tension in the room has reached its peak. The cameras zoom in on Zohran Mamdani, who stands tall, unwavering. The debate has escalated, and now, more than ever, the truth of Zohran's words is undeniable. Ben Shapiro, visibly defeated, takes a moment to collect himself. The audience waits in anticipation, unsure of what Ben will say next. Ben Shapiro, you're not listening, Zohran. All of this, all of your arguments, it's just a social experiment, one that could tear apart the fabric of society. What you call humanity could end up destabilizing everything we've worked for. This isn't about truth anymore. This is about tearing down institutions and building something unrecognizable. Zohran's face remains composed, and he speaks with a calmness that contrasts Ben's increasing desperation. Zohran Mamdani, Ben, no one is asking for society to fall apart. What we're asking for is for it to evolve. It's about building a world where everyone, no matter their gender, no matter their sexual orientation, can thrive and live authentically without fear of persecution. What you're calling institutional stability is really just the status quo, and the status quo is harmful to so many people. Zohran pauses, letting the weight of his words settle. He looks out at the audience, his voice rising with conviction. Zohran Mamdani. The institutions you're so eager to protect have been the very same ones that have oppressed marginalized communities for centuries. We're asking for the right to exist. We're asking for a society that recognizes us, not as exceptions to the rule, but as equal, valid, and deserving of respect. No one is forcing anything on anyone. We're asking for the freedom to be who we are. The audience begins to cheer, some standing in support, while others nod in agreement. The mood in the room has shifted entirely, and Zohran Mamdani is not just winning the debate, he's winning hearts and minds. Zohran Mamdani. Let me make this clear, Ben. This isn't about ideology. This is about real people. People who are struggling every day to be accepted. People who are being denied healthcare, denied the opportunity to live freely, denied love simply because of who they are. And that is a truth you can't deny, no matter how many times you try to discredit the science, the data, or the experiences of those who live it. Ben Shapiro's frustration grows as he tries to interject, but Zohran remains resolute. Ben Shapiro. But Zohran, what about the future? What happens when society shifts too far? When children grow up not knowing where they stand? We're talking about creating confusion, not clarity. Zohran Mamdani. Ben, the confusion you're talking about isn't coming from the people fighting for equality. It's coming from those who refuse to understand what it means to live authentically. Society is changing because people are demanding it. And I'll tell you this, the future is one where we're all free to express who we are without fear, without hate. The future is one of equality, compassion, and respect. And I'm fighting for that future. There's a palpable shift in the air. The room fills with applause, the audience visibly moved by Zohran's words. Ben Shapiro's face shows the first signs of defeat, the power dynamic of the debate now fully in Zohran's favor. Zohran pauses for a moment, letting the applause die down. The crowd is on his side, but he knows this fight is far from over. He turns to the camera, his tone calm yet powerful. Zohran Mamdani, this debate may be over, but the work is far from finished. We're in a moment of history, a moment where the choices we make today will define the world we leave behind. The fight for LGBTQ+ rights, gender equality, and freedom is not just a fight for today, it's a fight for tomorrow, and it's one we can't afford to lose. As the camera zooms out, Zohran's final words echo in the room, a resounding call for action. Zohran Mamdani, so let's stand together. Let's demand a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, no matter who they are or who they love. Let's build a future where no one is left behind. We are stronger together, and together we will create a world where equality reigns. The applause becomes deafening. Zohran Mamdani has emerged not just as the victor of this debate, but as a symbol of hope for the future. The camera pulls back, showing a crowd energized and inspired by his message. It's clear, Zohran Mamdani is the hero of this story. Final call to action, Zohran Mamdani. If you believe in a future where equality, respect, and dignity for all people are the foundation of society, join the movement. Hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. We're in this fight together, and together we can make a difference. The video fades out, leaving a lasting impact. The debate may have ended, but the conversation is just beginning. Zohran Mamdani stands as the hero.